Frano Selak was in a race against time, sprinting to the airport. His mother was seriously ill and he needed to get to her as soon as possible. The flight was packed, every seat taken, but Frano told them about his urgent need to see his mom, and they squeezed him into the last available spot at the back next to Rosica, the flight attendant. The plane was just minutes from landing when disaster struck. The engines cut out with a sickening silence, and panic rippled through the cabin as the aircraft began its catastrophic plunge towards the earth. Then, in a final terrifying moment, the plane smashed into a boulder, erupting into flames and twisted metal, tragically killing everyone on board, except, unbelievably, for 2 people. In a bizarre twist of fate, just before the crash, the door beside Frano was ripped away, and without his seatbelt on, he was ejected into the open air. Falling from 800 meters, Frano miraculously survived by landing in a haystack. Barely a scratch on him. Rosica, the flight attendant next to him, also survived, making them the sole survivors of the horrific crash. Little did he know, this was just the first chapter in what would become a legendary story of survival, known as the world's luckiest unlucky man, with an unexpected twist at the late years of his life. You'd think, after a free fall from the sky, Frano Selak might have used up all his bad luck, right? Well, not exactly. Deciding that planes were a no-go, Frano stuck to the ground. But even there, he wasn't safe from his bizarre streak of mishaps. Frano was riding a train, probably enjoying the ride and not thinking much about his past adventures. Out of nowhere, a massive boulder decided it was time to shake things up. It crashed onto the tracks, sending the train hurtling off the rails and into the icy embrace of the river below. Frano's survival instincts kicked in. He smashed the compartment window, not just making an escape route for himself, but also pulling an acquaintance to safety. The villagers from nearby pulled them out of the icy waters, saving them from a worse fate. While Frano got away with a broken arm and a serious kill from hypothermia, 17 other unfortunate souls weren't as lucky. Just when you'd think Frano Selak might catch a break from his run-ins with disaster, fate spun the wheel again. This time, he was aboard a bus, perhaps thinking he'd sidestepped enough calamities to last a lifetime. But as luck would have it, even the bus ride wouldn't go smoothly. Out of the blue, the bus veered sharply, swerved off the road, and plunged into a river. The bus quickly filled with water, turning from a vehicle into a sinking trap. Amid the splashing and screaming, Frano and the bus driver both managed to wriggle out of the bus and swim to shore, with just a few minor cuts and bruises. Tragically, they were the only survivors. Everyone else on board drowned. After a string of public transport disasters, Frano Selak decided that enough was enough. He figured he'd have more control and potentially more safety if he stuck to traveling by car. But as it turned out, not even switching to private transport could tame Frano's wild luck. Just a year into his new policy, Frano was cruising along a mountain. Out of nowhere, a truck came barreling towards him. Frano was once again fighting for his life. In a split-second decision, he swerved to avoid a head-on collision, smashing into the guardrail instead. The impact was brutal, and the guardrail buckled under the force, sending his car flying off the edge and into a 100-meter freefall towards the ravine below. Now, you might think this was the end for Frano, but our man wasn't done yet. Miraculously, he wasn't wearing a seatbelt, something he had sworn to never wear after surviving the plane crash years earlier. As his car was falling, just in time, he jumped out of the car window and managed to grab onto a tree clinging to the steep slope. The disasters in Frano Selak's life kept coming. He narrowly escaped a car that burst into flames just before the fuel tank exploded. Another time, a malfunctioning fuel pump caused his car to catch fire, burning off most of his hair but sparing him serious injury. He even survived being hit by a bus with hardly a scratch. These were his final brushes with disaster, but Frano's incredible story had one last twist in store, securing his reputation as the luckiest unlucky man ever. At the ripe age of 72, after decades of narrowly escaping death, Frano Selak decided to try his luck in a different arena. He bought a lottery ticket, his first in over 40 years. In a twist that seemed perfectly in line with his unbelievable life, he won the jackpot, nearly $1 million. With his newfound wealth, Frano bought a house and a holiday home, and in a grand gesture of generosity, he shared the bulk of his winnings with friends and family. This old Saudi man never expected his worst day to end in tears of joy. While cruising along in his trusty old car, excited about catching a live football match at the stadium, the car, like its owner, was old and reliable until today. It suddenly sputtered and died just as the stadium was coming into view. Despite his efforts, the engine refused to start again. With the sun beating down mercilessly and no help in sight, he decided to make the rest of the journey on foot. It was a tough decision, but missing the game wasn't an option for him. Locking the car behind him, he walked the last stretch under the oppressive heat. Upon arriving at the stadium, he was already exhausted and drenched in sweat. He found his seat among the vibrant crowd. He tried to lose himself in the excitement, but his thoughts kept drifting back to his broken-down car. Now, stranded, he worried about how he would get back home. The game would end late, the service stations would be closed, and there was no one nearby he could call for help. Come halftime, while he was sitting there lost in these anxious thoughts, a sudden poke startled him. He turned to find a young fellow next to him, grinning and gesturing wildly at the big screen overhead. Confused, he looked up and his heart skipped a beat. There on the big screen, for the whole stadium to see, was his own face, surprised and a bit out of place among the sea of younger faces. The stadium erupted in cheers as the announcement came over the loudspeakers. The man on the screen had won a prize. All he had to do was come down to the field to claim it. Turns out, every ticket bought included a chance to win something big at halftime, and today, the football gods had pointed the camera at him. The announcer handed him a set of shiny new car keys. "Congratulations, sir. You've just won a brand new car." Tears welled up in his eyes as he took the keys. He looked up, his voice trembling with emotion. "Just this morning, as my old car breathed its last on the way here, I lifted my hands to the sky and prayed for help. I never imagined this."